Welcome to the Pebble in My Shoe. I'm Miffy Hode, your host here, and each episode I'm in conversation with my guests about the pebble in their shoe that has nudged them to choose a life that aligns them closer to their truth and authentic self. The pebble in my shoe is an analogy for an inner niggle or knowing that becomes so insistent that we have to pay attention. We can ignore it only for so long and eventually have to stop to investigate it, listen to it, and honor what it's telling us. It becomes a catalyst for action, to change something that no longer serves us. This can be something internal, like a belief or mindset. It can be about how we behave in certain situations or relationships, or it can be something that changes our life trajectory, like ending a relationship, changing careers, or moving to a different place. Taking the action and making the change invariably requires courage, often a leap of faith, and at the very least, to try something new and outside of our comfort zone. Whatever the action or change happens to be, the pebble ultimately moves us to live more authentically and more aligned to our true nature. My intention for these conversations is to inspire or offer hope to those of you who resonate with the stories shared, that you'll hear something that supports you on your own journey, and if there's a pebble in your shoe, that you'll find the courage to make the changes that align you closer with your authentic self. Thank you for being here, and let me introduce today's guest. Lorna Lyons is an ex-teacher by profession and has successfully launched 2 online businesses in the space of 2 years, which allowed her to walk away from her day job to work full-time in her businesses. She holds a first-class master's in applied psychology, is a positive psychology coach, and uses her strength-based coaching philosophy for her first business, Bump and Beyond Wellness. Through the development of this business, a spark was reignited inside her as she discovered a passion for doing something she loved. Through the development of her courses and programs for the MumBOSS, she has combined her expertise of 1, coaching mums to enhance their wellness, and 2, building a successful online business in order to support other women wanting to have more flexibility to be with their children at home and financially independent. Lorna leads a thriving learning and community network for mothers in business, and this network combines teaching the exact strategies she used for growing her business successfully online using Instagram. Members also get to participate monthly in expert masterclasses and coaching calls. So here is my conversation with Lorna Lyons. So welcome, Lorna. Thanks a million for joining me on the Pebble in My Shoe.
Thank you so much for having me here, Miffy. I'm absolutely delighted and privileged to join you today.
Maybe we could just start with you just giving us a bit of an overview about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, sure. Okay, my name is Lorna Lyons. First and foremost, I'm a mum to 3 young children, 10, 9 and 6, wife to my husband Fergal for the last 13 years. I now identify as an entrepreneur. I'm the owner and founder of a coaching and mentoring company called the MumBOSS, and leader of a community for women in business, a learning community for women in business called the MumBOSS Network. But I didn't always identify as an entrepreneur, that's for sure. A lot has changed over the last 5 years of my life. But in a previous identity, I would have been a teacher, secondary school teacher, maths and business. And prior to that, a recruitment consultant. And throughout all of the first 40 years of my life, I think I would have identified myself as a typical good girl, following society, following the trajectory and the roadmap that the external environment told me to follow. But I've changed things up gratefully in the last couple of years, which I am I feel very grateful and blessed to have done.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, I know you anyway quite well, I suppose, through the MumBOSS Network.
Yeah.
And I know your energy, I know your vibe, and I know how inspiring you are. I suppose what I feel in what you've just described yourself as is that there is a great big story there, and you obviously didn't just arrive at being an entrepreneur, just sort of overnight decide I'm going to leave my teaching job and become an entrepreneur. So I'm really interested on this podcast in finding out about the real nitty gritty of those pebbles in our shoe that push us towards a life that's less conventional, because you described yourself as so they're living the life of a good girl. And that good girl is in inverted commas, obviously, and idea that we are programmed to live a particular way and that there is this plan that is recognized as somebody doing well in life, right? They've done well for themselves. So can you talk to me about how that was for you? What was it like being a good girl?
You know what, Miffy? It was a very comfortable place to be. I didn't realize I was programmed. There was a complete lack of awareness in my old life versus what I have now. And that programming that you're talking into, it's something that I'm really fascinated by because I just think so many of the human population out there are completely and utterly programmed to do things that do not light them up, that they do not love, that does not bring them joy. And it's not about just feeding into the happy life or the good life. Like, I'm a positive psychology coach, so I've actually got a master's in the science of happiness. So I do delve and work a lot with my clients around what is it that brings you joy and help them be able to improve their lives and their mindsets in that way. But it's not necessarily about wrapping a life that's just filled with all of the sort of happiness emotions or the positive emotions out there. It's more about being willing to lean into and accept the full entire spectrum of emotions that we get to experience as humans, and with full knowledge and awareness of the bad stuff and the ugly stuff, that they are all elements of training and learning for us to be able to do things in a way that will serve us in our future in a better way. And this area of programming and subconscious programming, it's very, very fascinating for me because I did not know there was a niggle in my shoe. I did not know there was a pebble in my shoe. When I was a teacher and I was getting married and buying the house and having the children and being the good daughter and the good sister and the good friend and all of the things, I was just operating through life on autopilot, doing everything that I knew I should be doing. And I wasn't unhappy, but I also was lacking emotions like what I just talked about there, the entire spectrum of all of the different feelings we're having. I was just a grayed out version of myself is the only way I can describe it. So I suppose the whole programming or the changes for me during that time was, it all started with awareness and having an understanding that there could be more out there that I needed to tap into. And it's just been over the last few years, it's been piece by piece, layer by layer, little bit by little bit, more things have been unwrapped. And I've found myself now on this beautiful journey, excited about all that I still need to figure out and learn out about myself, about the future. And I love helping other women shine a light on the fact that there's so much more inside them that they have yet to tap into, so much more to understand about what their life gets to look like. In a way that just fully serves us for the kind of future we want to be able to live into.
Yeah, and I'm interested in a few bits in that. One is the statement you made, you were a grayed out version of yourself. So I'm really interested to hear about how you came to recognize that you had more color, that it wasn't being utilized or wasn't shining. So can you tell me about that? What was that like, maybe coming to realize that? Or was it a process? Was it a moment? What was that for you?
It was a process for me through self-care. So I was kicked up the backside by my sister to go take on coaching as a master's in the first place. I didn't know much about coaching at that time, but through the fact that I wasn't that happy in my teaching job, my sister gave me the kick up the backside and said, go do something different that excites you. I always liked the idea of psychology and mindset. So I leaned into this and I applied for this coaching master's in UCC. And through the involvement of that course, I obviously was getting coached myself. And with the coaching that I was receiving, it was being expected of us to access more time that we could feed into ourselves, that we could nourish our physical selves, our psychological selves, our spiritual selves, all of the things. And so what that required of me was to create some space in my very, very busy life to do things for myself. And with the creation of that space came an awareness of, oh my good Jesus, I never create space for myself for anything. The sheer act, I'll never forget the day I took the calendar down off the wall and started writing in on a Sunday afternoon a time block from 3 until 6. That was time for Lorna. And the acceptance that was there from my husband as I did that, a little bit of shock initially, and a little bit of walking around and looking over my shoulder and going, what are you doing with the calendar? I'm like, I'm scheduling in my time. He's like, okay. And then he started to schedule in his time, and suddenly our calendar was full of my time and his time. And we had to find the balance and the harmony right there. But that's where it begun for me, was scheduling in time for myself. And that at the time could have been going to the sea and going for a swim with my friends. It could have been sitting in the car and driving to a coffee shop and drinking a coffee in the car with my phone and scrolling, if that's what I wanted. It didn't matter. There was no prescription to what that self-care needed to look like. But with that little chink of light around prioritizing myself, it felt incredible. It felt like, oh my God, there's more. There's more. I can fill up other people's cups if I look after myself first. So that was the beginning of the awareness piece for me, Miffy. And I suppose I got hooked on the dopamine of self-care, and I've just been on a deep dive down that space since, and creating more and more space around me and capacity to be really selfish, but in a really selfless way. And I think there's a real cohesiveness with that, because my priorities are my family and being there for them. But before, I used to absolutely spread myself, flatten myself on the ground to be able to do that. And now I've actually elevated myself up to a place where I'm of equal standing to my husband and my children. And that's a very liberating place to feel from.
That's massive. That's a massive statement. And I think that it's probably something that's going to resonate with a lot of women. For a lot of us as mothers with young children, we do feel that kind of, we are so committed to being the mother and being there for them that we often do park any of our needs and we leave them. I mean, I remember when I was a mother of young children, my time was like after 9 o'clock at night, when everybody was in bed, when the uniforms were ready for the next morning, the lunches were made for the next morning, and all of that was done. Then that was my time, when I was bloody well exhausted, right? But I needed that time when they were in bed. And people say, oh, why don't you just go to bed and sleep when the kids are asleep? And they're like, no, because then you just never have any time to yourself. So, you know, I'm really hearing that through what you're saying about how important that is for us. And it's important for men too. But I think as mothers, we just have that natural sort of capacity to be all things for all people within the family home, and then accept ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that being said, that whole space of motherhood and the younger years and the exhaustion that comes tied with that, as I was coming out of that and creating more awareness around this self-care and these pockets of space that I could create for myself, I also gained a heightened awareness of how little a voice I have had in my world and with my people for all of my life. And it wasn't, again, something that was being pressed upon me by other people, but it was I was a product of my own childhood, the growing up, the place that I came in the family, being the youngest, I think there was a lot of big voices around me. So I became the quieter one. I became the one that didn't say very much. I became the one that just went along with other people. And so that formed a lot of my decision making, later in my life, in my 20s and my 30s. I had become this person that just went along with other people and what it is that they wanted to be doing, even though it wasn't what I wanted to be doing. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't matched up with the having the house and getting married and having the kids side of things. That is stuff that I intrinsically wanted, but more like on a social level, the jobs that I was interviewing for, the careers that I was investing myself in, the social environments I was hanging out in, like the things that I was doing, they weren't things that brought me joy. They weren't things that I would directly choose for myself. So with this awakening of prioritizing myself first, I also had this enlightenment that I actually had a voice buried very, very, very deep, 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 deep down inside me. And again, this became a huge journey of trying to pull this voice out little by little by little. And it's just been the greatest gift I have ever given myself. And I just think that anyone can give themselves to go on the journey to find your voice and to feel good enough and worthy enough to be able to exercise it and express it and be completely okay with getting it wrong sometimes, be completely okay with making a muck of things, but just to trust the process and to find it and to bring it out. It's a very, very freeing and like just liberating experience. It makes you just feel like you can take on the world.
Yeah. And it doesn't happen without a level of courage. But before we get to that, I'd like to go back, please, because you mentioned 3 different careers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So your first career of choice was in the corporate space. So can you tell me about what brought you in there and what that was like for you?
Sure. So go back to, doing the Leaving Cert here in Ireland and, what it was that I would aim for. I didn't know really what it is that I wanted to do. Like so many 18-year-olds who have to make choices about the rest of their lives. And so I chose something nice and broad, business studies. And through the course of that 4-year degree, got a degree in business. And I was always crazy to just take flight and to go places and travel and experience new things. So when I finished college in UL with my business degree, I immediately got on a plane and went to London. I was like, this is where I'm going to set up. And, I went for I went for interviews in recruitment companies who could get me a job in the business world. And the recruitment company ended up bringing me back saying, have you ever considered working in recruitment? And I was like, no, I don't even know what that is. These are the people who are sort of interviewing me for a different job. And they were like, we think you'd actually be a really good fit in here. So sent me some details to read up more about it and actually interview for a position in their company. So I started off over in JPA recruitment as a graduate recruitment to recruitment consultant. And within, I think it was 18 months, I had worked my way up from the bottom resourcer level right up to senior consultant with a team of 5 consultants underneath me. And there I was, this young 22, 23-year-old like woman starting off in life in London with this team of consultants underneath me and, living the London life. And it was great, great fun.
Can I just pause you there though, because what those interviewers saw in you, the recruitment company themselves saw that potential in you, right? So that was obviously very much intrinsically you, that outgoing person, but that you also had those skills required for that recruitment, and you proved them right in that you sailed to the top and so on.
Yeah.
Can I ask you, Lorna, what got uncomfortable there? Because you made a change then to go to teaching. So what got uncomfortable in the corporate recruitment space?
It's really interesting that you bring my attention to this. So a couple of things happened. Number one, I loved that job. And I loved the ambition and the fire and the motivation and all of the stuff going on inside there. But it was actually a really good thing that moved me on from there, because I had saved up enough money in this amazing position to travel the world. So myself and my then boyfriend, now husband, got a one-way ticket to Australia, and we ended up traveling for 2 years together, all around Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand, South America. So we did this for 2 years, traveling, and we worked for maybe 9 months, I think, of those 2 years. The rest of our time was just seeing things and experiencing things. So what happened next when I came home, I think, may have been the start of the dampening of that identity, of the ambition and stuff. So what happened was, when we came home, there was everything was going upside down in the economy, and there wasn't many jobs out there. And I had fully thought that I was going to come home and be a recruitment consultant again. But then, because the jobs weren't there, I was like, that's not the right industry to get into. So I got hired as a district manager for Lidl. So looking after all of Munster, as a district manager. And I worked there for 9 months, and it was the hardest job. Hard is the wrong word, but it was a job that nobody should ever have done at that time. It was the conditions were extremely difficult. The expectations of what a person should do were extremely difficult. I do believe they operate completely differently now to that time. This is back in 2009, I'm gonna say. And yeah, it was, we were working consistently 60 to 70 hour weeks, up very, very early in the morning, 4 a.m.s, to get to certain stores to do certain things. And I could still be there at 11 o'clock at night some nights. So it was difficult conditions, and I was stretched to the limit. And so during this time with this job that I was finding really incredibly difficult, my then boyfriend, still now husband, was a teacher. And I was looking at, every time I was getting up to go to work, he was sleeping. And when I was coming home from work, he was sleeping. It was like, oh my God, do you do anything other than sleep? And he was like, yeah, I have a life. I go places. I do this, I do that. And I just never seemed to have enough time. And I at that time, I remember thinking, there's no point having all of this money in my bank account, because I had this company car, this great salary. What is the point in having it all there if I'm not able to live? And so I looked at him and I went, teaching seems to be the thing to do. Like, look at you. And so that was the start of me doing something that suited somebody else, that I thought was the right thing for me, but it wasn't. So I applied to take on the teaching dip, got the teaching dip, went straight out from it and got into teaching, and was teaching then for approximately 10 years. Within that time, I had 3 babies as well. So in and out of the school environment. And so I think, your question there was like, what happened between leaving one place that was obviously sparking my energy, and then finding myself to somewhere else where I was like this grayed out version of myself. And even though I would never say that the teaching industry did that to me, it was my personality and me not living into my intrinsic desires and motivations that did that to me. I ended up seemingly working in a job that was made for life. It was permanent. It was pensionable. I was set up for life. I had my June, July, and August off. Anyone who said it to compounded the thought in your head that you had it made. Yeah. So who was I to question that I wasn't enjoying it? Do you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is a massive bit of programming right there that a lot of people, myself included, have bought into. The measure of success is when you have the permanent, pensionable, well-paid job. And it's a tough one. It's a really tough one, because there's so many people out there who are on the breadline, right? And we've got to be grateful for this and so on. That job, though, that you had as district manager, what were the silver linings? Like, what did it teach you? What did it give you, Lorna?
That particular job, what did it give me? It gave me an awareness of the core. I don't know. It's not the retail world. It was a very male dominated environment. and a very masculine, aggressive environment. So I suppose what it gave me was leadership capacities that I never, ever, ever wanted to embody,
Right.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
When you see something that you don't ever want to be, you know it exists out there, then you can become the polar opposite of it. So micromanaging and high expectations and non understanding of people's lives and personal lives, all of those things fed into me resenting a space whereby I was like a number to just go do all of these crazy things and not actually a person who was valued to gain rest, in between working periods.
Yeah. 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 So it's very much that highlighting for you how not to be, or how you didn't want to be, maybe.
Yeah, and I think that feeling of intimidation with authority. So this is something that I have worked on in the last couple of years that have stemmed on from my awareness of finding my voice and all of the things. One of my triggers, and I think it's a lot of us can resonate with this, is this intimidation by our elders, for example, when we're children, or that leans into them when we go to school, intimidation by our teachers. We must do what we're told there. And then we go into the working world, your managers or your bosses, and this intimidation piece. And so something that I've been working very hard on over the last couple of years, which I identified from this role, was my ability to be pushed down, suppressed, controlled, talked down to. And the work that I do now is to ensure that I never, ever let that happen to me again. Because I let that happen to me from loads of different places, not just that work environment. At times from my relationship with my husband, my relationship with my father, my relationship with my friends' parents when I was a child. So just having an awareness of this now is huge, because whenever it presents itself to me, hopefully I can catch it in those moments when I am aware of it and be able to have the self-assurance and confidence and voice to not let it happen again. That we're all equals.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's so powerful. And it's a process as well, isn't it? That recognition of, wow, this is not how I want to be treated. And yet, what do I do about it? Because you have to go inwards, don't you? You have to go in and have a rummage around in that mud where the lotus grows from, from mindfulness speak, no mud, no lotus. And so we have to go in and rummage around into the roots of this issue and examine ourselves, but also stand up for ourselves. There is this rebuilding, in my experience, there is this rebuilding of the self and that ability to stand in your power. And that is something that's hard won for a lot of us, isn't it? To actually stand there even when the wind is blowing hard and cold and we're feeling like we're going to get knocked over, but we have to dig our heels in. Literally.
Yeah.
It's that physical stance of standing in your power and owning who you are. Just mindful that isn't something that is just something you kind of go, oh, I'm not going to be oppressed or suppressed anymore, or, pushed down.
No,
there is this whole journey.
There is.
Can you talk, Lorna, about courage, and where has that come up for you? The courage to step into your power, the courage to take back your voice, the courage to speak up, stand up, all of that stuff.
I think we all have unique strengths that we can lean into. And something I did early on in my coaching education was I did this strengths awareness quiz. And you can access it free online. You can go into VIA strengths awareness quiz, something like that. If you Google that, you'll be brought to it. Your strengths and values. And so there is, like, you can have a paid version, but there's a free version that you can do there online that'll give you your top 12 strengths or something, 26 strengths maybe. But I remember the top 5 ones were the ones that we wrote down and really sort of considered how they might look. And my top strength that came up in that VIA quiz was courage. And I remember being really surprised by that. I surprised myself, but whatever way I had answered those questions on that day, that was obviously what I was feeling into. And courage was the number one thing that came up for me. And so the question I put to myself then was, what is it that I really want from my life? Like, what is it that I'm not doing now that I want more for? And how can I be a creator of this? Because I now know that nobody else can do this for me. I have to be my own hero in this life that has been a grayed out version of me. And if I want to make me a colour version of me, which I now believe in, I have a vision of it. I can see that it's there. I just haven't got grasp of it yet. What is it that I need to lean on my top strength to be able to do? So it just so happened that courage was my top strength. And oh my God, was there lots of things I needed courage for. But because I had almost given myself this cape and like an invisibility cloak that I could wrap around me, that somebody else externally had validated and told me that I was courageous, it helped me say, well, what would courageous Lorna do right now? Because I know frightened Lorna is saying no to whatever thing it is that was coming up. But I almost stepped into a different identity of what I could do, and I operated from that place. And it can be as simple as getting up from the seat that you're in right now, because this is the scary Lorna, and, you know, moving 3 seats over and sitting back down, because this is where courageous Lorna sits. And from this seat now, I'm going to operate in a way that courageous Lorna would operate. And so I would encourage any one of your listeners to do that strengths awareness quiz and see what your top 3 to 5 strengths are that's coming up. And then ask yourself, how can you lean more fully into what your individual strength is to be able to utilize that to do the things that you want to do? Because somebody might have, you know, loyalty come up for them, or love come up for them, or personal development come up for them, or, you know, all of these kindness come up for them. And so the actions that they would take would lean into what kindness would do or what love would do versus what courage would do. So I just think that that could be a really valuable thing for somebody to do, because we're all different, and the sort of actions that I take courageously, it's just not going to be in alignment with another person to be able to do that. But then if they act with kindness, if that's their top strength, that will feel so much better for them.
That's beautiful. And I know that that's a very powerful exercise, but I'm also hearing in there the power of embodiment. So you're talking about getting up from the seat where Lorna feels scared, Lorna, and sitting into, well, this is the seat where courageous Lorna sits, and it feels different. And that embodiment, I'm really a firm advocate for embodying virtues and embodying how we want to show up, because it is very, very powerful. And I know from my own life and using that practice how it really does make a difference. So what you're talking about there is stepping into taking on that. It's like wearing a coat, and you describe that mantle of graying yourself out. But equally, we can wear mantles of any description, right? So we can put on our courageous mantle or kind mantle or whatever it is and wear it and embody those virtues. So that's what you're describing about really taking aligned action with what you wanted for yourself, that you wanted to step into being more courageous. Courage isn't not being fearful, is it? It's being afraid, but doing it anyway. Sort of that whole thing, that Susan Jeffers book. If you never read the book and only use the title as an affirmation, feel the fear and do it anyway. That's what courage is, isn't it? It is actually stepping forward, even though you may feel uncertain. So I love that you have been proactive in pursuing that colorful version of you through those courageous acts and stepping into those strengths that are innate in you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, you know, no more than what we were talking about earlier, it being a journey to just be able to speak up for yourself and stand in your power, being able to embody something that's a completely different identity to you is also a journey. And it's not as simple as stepping up from your couch and just going 3 seats over and it becoming a different version of you. The work comes from initially creating space to visualize what you want your future to look like. So I know you're a big journaler. And so taking the time to journal and to write down and take what's out of your head and put it intentionally onto paper for exactly what it is that you want your future to look like, whether this is career driven or relationship driven or self-care driven, whatever your thing is that you want to be able to bring into your life, but writing that down on paper and then being able to sit with that, meditate with that, visualize, like really holding into what that looks like. Like, you know, at nighttime before you go to sleep, reading the sheet of paper or the sheets of paper that you've written this on over and over again. So you're bringing it, you're imprinting it on your mind before you go to sleep. And, you know, picking out certain elements of it and turning them into an affirmation that serves you. Like, I am strong and powerful, or I am able to step into my power. I can, whatever your sentence is that affirms what it is that you're trying to do, and put it on little post-it notes everywhere around you, like on your mirror where you brush your teeth, on your dressing table, on your phone, on your laptop. So now you've got like your vision script written out, you're reading it, you're imprinting it, you're seeing your post-it notes everywhere around you. So you're giving your mind all these little subconscious little tools to help you get to that place. So then when it comes down to you doing the piece where you want to embody something else, you know, standing up from the couch where you are and moving 3 seats over and sitting down, you're able to feel into that future vision that you've written out and you've been practicing. That's like that work needs to be done in order to be able to do the embodiment piece.
Yeah, for sure. And being clear about what it is that you're stepping into. Yeah. Yeah, that's lovely. Lorna, I'd like to hear more about your transition from teaching to being an entrepreneur, because I think that's a massive shift, because having done it myself, left the job and gone to this whole world of entrepreneurship, I'm really interested in hearing how that was and what was the process for you, that internal process for you.
So moving from teaching into entrepreneurship was done in tandem. Like, I kept my job for a year while setting up my side hustle business. And my side hustle business very firmly was wrapped around using social media as a tool to share my voice, to create messaging, connect with my people. So for a year of having continuing on my teaching job and starting up this Instagram account, this was a massive, massive journey through becoming visible, putting a phone up in front of my face and talking into it and sharing it with the world, and then throwing the phone under the bed and running away and hiding and wanting to hide so desperately. And, you know, meeting with people in my community saying, oh, I saw you on Instagram, you know, what's this you're doing? My family asked me, what is this thing that you're going? Everyone, sort of people watching, and of course they are, they're curious, they're interested. And it's massively exposing for those of us who are trying to do something completely new.
Can I just ask you, Lorna, what was your side hustle? So what was it that you were stepping away so dramatically from?
So the first business I set up was Bump and Beyond Wellness. And it was a coaching business helping women in the postpartum area of life be able to be proactive about their self-care, their self-wellness, all of things from my journey. And then I also trained as a hypnobirthing instructor. So I helped women prepare for a calm birth. So I had both sides of the spectrum in pregnancy and postpartum. And so for a year, I created my business over Instagram, Bump and Beyond Wellness. And I became known for creating the calm birth method, where I helped hundreds of women prepare for birth across the world. And because that's what Instagram allowed me to do. I was working with people in Australia, New Zealand, Sri Lanka, the UK, all over, obviously across Ireland. I couldn't believe I was getting all of these clients just from opening my mouth and speaking. Because if you remember, I actually hadn't ever really spoken very much or shared my voice or even really hosted an opinion. When I look back at my life, I literally just went along with other people. I didn't speak up. I didn't think alternative points of view. I just went along with the crowd. So here was me for the first time creating, being a creator, coming up with ideas of support and help for other people that I knew had benefited me. And like, I was just going, oh my God, people are listening. People are actually listening to me. What is going on? So that was a huge boost to my self-confidence that I was being heard. Yeah.
Yeah. There's something in there too, because I have this sort of experience of it feels like coming out of the closet. And I've had this conversation with several of the guests that there is this time when we're stepping into who we truly are, or we're claiming our power, standing in our truth. And there is this piece of coming out and exposing ourselves for who we truly feel we are. And that is scary, like you're describing. And so, how did that feel for you? When I talk about coming out of the closet around that, does that resonate for you?
Yeah, it was so scary, but also really satisfying. Really satisfying to be heard and to be accepted for your own unique truths, your own unique voices, because I definitely would have had some self-dialogue, which was, you better not say that. That's not right. Oh no, you're definitely going to have it wrong there. You're going to muck it up some way. Like I definitely would have had self-inner negative dialogue, keeping my voice small and dampened down for fear of getting it wrong. So it was a really scary thing to speak up, but it was really satisfying. It was obviously really satisfying because it has propelled me to do more and more and more of it. And in fact, try my very hardest to accelerate the speed by which I get even more of my voice up and out and shine my light even bigger so that I can help other people shine their lights even bigger. Like that's become a real purpose and mission of mine. I got this human design reading done a couple of years ago. Have you ever had human design readings done for you?
I've heard of it, but I haven't had it done. Yeah.
So I went and had a human design reading about 2 years ago. I'm 42 now, so I was 40 turning 41, and the lovely lady told me that when I was approximately 50, I was going to have this massive epiphany or awakening or self-confidence, self-trust to be able to share my message more wholeheartedly. And I was going to help and serve so many more women. And so hearing that then gave me a real sort of spark of like, oh my goodness, this sounds really exciting. And what it's done for me in the last year is I almost want to get to that point quicker in time. I want to share my voice, share my opinions, get it wrong, fail forward, show up again, be resilient, learn more, bring other people along the way, and do all the things in even a shorter timeline than waiting another 8 years to have this moment of like awareness or whatever it is. So though it's scary, because that was your question, Miffy, though it's scary, it is so goddamn worth it.
Yeah, I hear that, and your excitement is so tangible. Your passion is just, it's lovely. It bubbles out of you and it bubbles off the screen here as we're talking. I want to ask you, Lorna, about intuition and nudges and that kind of gut feeling about things, and where does that fit in all of this journey for you?
Yeah, so I'm massively intuitive. I feel like I always have been, but I didn't trust myself enough before. Just maybe I just didn't have a light shining on it. I think since my mom passed away 6 years ago, when I was pregnant with my third little baby, I became more in tune with looking for signs from her, looking for support and help and guidance at different times. And when I got beautiful messages coming directly from her, it really opened my mind up to the support and help that I can access when I go inwards and when I dull down all the noise around me. turn the volumes down on all of the voices around me, and I just go for a lovely walk by myself and listen to my own voice inside my head, whether it's a voice inside my head or that's sort of intellectually speaking, more the gut feeling or response that I have inside my belly, which is like just this message of what it is that I should do next. So I try to do that a lot. I try to go quiet a lot. In fact, I know whenever I'm getting stressed and anxious and my nervous system is kind of spiraling out of control, that is the number one thing I need to do. It's just I need quiet around me, whether it's taking a shower and just being in the water and the quiet time there, or getting out for a walk, whichever I'm able to do at a time when I have kids around the house. And just, yeah, asking questions to myself and not needing any external validation from it, actually just taking the intuitive internal response and trusting myself, surrendering to it, and moving forward, whether they are questions that I have in my life, in my personal life, with my family, with my friends, or whether they're, business related. It works for both.
Yeah. Yeah. So important. Can I ask you, Lorna, about the difference it has made for you to follow what I'm sort of calling the colorful version of you, from the grayed out version of you?
It has made me feel like a much bigger version of myself. I don't know if that computes or if that makes sense, but it's like I wasn't there before, or I was like not necessarily a wallflower, because I don't want to paint an identity that wasn't true. I wasn't a wallflower, but I just did not take up space. And now I'm like, whatever conversation is happening around my dinner table, I'm like in it. I'm leaning forward. I'm sharing. And it's so good to just feel like your voice is worthy enough to be heard after 40 years of never having the confidence to speak up and be heard. That's the truth of it. For 40 years, I'd have sat there and smiled and looked pretty and nodded along to everyone around me for fear of saying the wrong thing and whatever the repercussions that I believed were going to be a result of that. What, were people not going to like me? Were people going to think less of me? Were people going to think I was not clever enough? Or, who was Fergal to marry someone like this? I don't know what I was saying to myself. All I know now is that it feels really good to put my elbows out, my arms up, twirl around if I want, and take up space, and to teach my kids to do that too. Like, that's really important to me. We dance all the time. I get them to reach their arms and their legs out, put them into all these queer, abnormal shapes so that we physically learn to take up more space. Because when we can do it with our limbs, we're creating more breath work for our voice to be able to come into that sphere as well. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what it feels like for me.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I love that you're teaching your kids that, because, they are learning such vital skills that we had to learn, as adults. Like, I was at a sound bath last night and it was absolutely beautiful, but I was delighted to see how many young women were there, in their 20s and 30s, because that, sound baths were not a thing in west of Ireland like 20, 30, 40 years ago, right? And now they're nearly mainstream, right? So so it's beautiful that younger people and that children are learning, like you say, how to take up space, and in a positive way, not in a showy offy kind of way, but in just that standing in your power way, because we didn't learn those children. And in fact, we learned to sit down and be quiet and only speak when we were spoken to. And even then we might say the wrong thing and be chastised. So all of that programming has a root, and it has so I think it's beautiful that you're not only doing this for yourself, you're doing it for your family. And of course, you're doing it for all the women that you serve, Lorna. So I know that you have a timeline, and an accelerated timeline now, Lorna. So what's next?
What's next? I love the idea of creating whatever it is that I desire next. Like, what I spent 40 years doing was having a plan, what I'm going to do in the next year, 3 years, 5 years. And I followed foot and did all of that. I actually really rebel against that rigidity anymore. I really rebel against constraints and timelines and inflexibilities. And maybe it's the school bell has haunted me, or I don't know what it is, but I actually refuse to even acknowledge what may be in 5 years' time. I just hope I keep getting bigger and better and bringing everybody else along on the journey so we all get to enjoy it and like look at each other and just be like, we did this. Look what we're doing. Look what we get to do. Like I just want that fun and zest for life to exist and to continually want to keep growing mentally, like the personal development side of things, like the reading of the books and listening to podcasts that interest me. Like my husband just looks at me and he's like, how do you, work? How do you always thinking about work? And I'm like, this isn't work. This is personal development. It's growth. Like I love it. I'm so fascinated by it. So I hope that interest and curiosity stays with me, but I'm sure it will evolve into things that I don't even know exist right now.
Yeah, yeah, and that's beautiful. Yeah. I used to be very concerned about the blurred lines between my work and my personal life because, I've worked so much in personal development and it's so important for me that there are these blurred lines and when are you working and when are you not and stuff. But in actual fact, if you are living and breathing what you do, then it never feels like work, right? Or it shouldn't.
Oh, totally.
Can I ask another question, Lorna, before we wrap up? And that is about, the common thread throughout your life, because although you are living a life dramatically different to the one that you sort of were programmed to live, let's say, right? But there has to be a common thread for us that we're still the person that was born, into this world. So for you, what is that thread that you have followed, do you think?
That's a tough question. I completely agree. I feel like we're all, following the breadcrumbs to where it is that we end up now. And I feel like there's so many different paths that we could potentially take based on decisions that we make at any one time. And some of the decisions that we make, which are more courageous, can just help us, take a path maybe quicker than other ones can. But what is the thread that has carried through for me? Like, I think my mindset is something like I've always had an optimistic perspective, let's say, in all things that have happened throughout life. I've always been a dreamer. I've always been very hopeful. It's very annoying for people around me who try and bring me back down to earth, and I've had to like bash them off and like float on up to the sky again. So I have always been someone who dreams big, who hopes, who thinks the best of people, and who's had a perspective that sees glasses half full where other people see glasses half empty. So, even through the hardest of times that I've had to go through, like, my mom had leukemia for a year while I was trying to get pregnant and having miscarriages, and then having her pass away while I was pregnant, and then giving birth without her around was a really challenging 12 months in my life. But throughout all that time, when things were happening, bad things were happening, I could always have a perspective that I was just so grateful for things that they were happening in the way that they were happening, and how I was getting time with her, and how we got to say things that needed to be said, like where other people might have been really negatively influenced by things that were happening then. I always was able to have an optimistic perspective on things. And I think that served me well throughout my youth and as I've matured. And it's what I feel like I feel into most often when I'm working with women in business as well. It's tuning into the perspective that they're looking at in their life, in their business, in their relationships. And if you're able to self-reflect and work on yourself, this is the personal development, the personal growth, the self-awareness, the journey, then you're able to have a much better environment that you're living in. You're able to have a life that's more joyous to live in. if you work on your own perspective changing first versus what a lot of us try and do when we're programmed and we're being the good girl and we're operating in the lifestyle of doing the things that society has dictated to us that we should do. What we often try and do is change our external circumstances, change our husband, change the way other people are, our job, the people that we're working with. We try and look at ways that change other people. But for me, the common thread has always been about going inwards and how I can up level myself so that I can meet my environment in a different way.
That's really interesting.
I feel like that's something that I have been following, but not aware that I've been following.
Yeah, it's powerful. Thank you so much, Lorna. You've been really generous in both sharing your own story, but also your wonderful wisdom and knowledge around the science of all of this stuff as well. But the lived part of it, is really where it's at, isn't it? And I'm really grateful to you for all of that. So Lorna, if there was somebody that wanted to get in touch with you to work with you in a one-to-one capacity, or the MumBOSS network or any of that, tell us about how people can contact you.
The best way to contact me is on my Instagram page at the MumBOSS network. And there's a variety of different ways that you can work with us. You can come into the MumBOSS network as a member there. You can take part, and as a MumBOSS, you get access to an insane amount of learning tools to be able to build, grow, and scale your business online. There's also capacity to work in different containers with me. I love to help people set up recurring revenue community memberships because it's how I've been able to build my business. So I love to help people do that. And I obviously support people through one-to-one as well. But the best way to contact me, and I love to hear from people, is to jump into my DMs, and my Instagram is at the MumBOSS network.
That's brilliant. Thanks a million, Lorna. And I can vouch for that because the MumBOSS network is just an absolute mine of information, both self-directed stuff, but also the beautiful people that are in there, not least yourself, but all of the women there are so supportive. It's a lovely environment to be in. It doesn't matter what you're into. The MumBOSS network is there to serve, and your kids don't have to be little either, like me.
No, and you don't even have to have kids. I started off as a MumBOSS network because I was obviously, in tune with myself and supporting other mums growing businesses. But we have people inside there who are like, is it okay if I don't have mums? I've got dogs. I'm a dog mum. I'm like, that's okay. As long as you've got the ethos and like a similar like-minded nature to growing a business alongside your life, like you're having your values at the front and center. We're not into the hustle and the grind. We are into positive psychology, mindset, and energy management. So if you've got like a holistic feel to yourself, not even, it doesn't have to be about your business, but like you yourself are holistically inclined, then you will just adore the community and the women inside this group because it is very, very special. That's for sure.
Yeah, 100%. That's brilliant, Lorna. Thanks ever so much for that. So I'm going to put all your details in the show notes, and I'm also going to put the link for the VIA Strengths and Values quiz for people. So if you want to take that quiz, you can. Thank you for listening to The Pebble in My Shoe. I always come away from time with Lorna uplifted and inspired, and this time is no exception. Lorna really walks her talk and always reminds me of the saying, a rising tide lifts all boats. Lorna lifts everyone who engages with her. Her description of being a greyed out version of herself struck a chord with me, and I'm so glad that she has not just found but manifested her full colour life, which she uses to shine light on so many other people's lives through her work. If you're interested to learn more about the MumBOSS network or any of Lorna's work, you'll find her contact details in the show notes. I'm also putting a link in there to the VIA Strengths and Values quiz. If you've enjoyed listening, please like, subscribe, and share it with others. It makes it easier for other people to find the podcast. And if you have a story to tell about a pebble in your shoe, please get in touch. I'd love to talk with you about it for the listeners. As well as hosting this podcast, I'm a personal growth coach at the Daisy Coaching Hub, where I provide one-to-one coaching for personal growth, group classes, and self-directed resources that support, nurture, and energize you on your personal growth journey. You can follow me on Instagram at daisy_coaching_hub and also on Facebook and LinkedIn. You can visit my website, www.daisycoaching.ie, and also subscribe to my newsletter to be kept informed of the latest happenings at the Daisy Coaching Hub, and also receive inspiration and resources to support, nurture, and energize you. I look forward to sharing the next episode of the Pebble in My Shoe with you. Bye for now.